We'll start in a second here. So we're going to live stream on YouTube as well.
We're going to be famous.
We're going to be real famous today. All right, we'll get started, Joe. All right, everyone, good morning. This is the session today is about structuring your startup for and negotiating financing. So Joe will get started in a second. I'll just give you an update on the event. The event this year, this is life science. We have two of them every year, life science event and a non-life science event, which will be coming up in October. Usually our life science is in April, but we pushed it a little bit this year for different scheduling reasons. Regardless, we really had we have a lot of companies this year for life science. 155 companies applied from 27 states and 5 different countries. So it was really hard to select 10 to present on Thursday. The top 10 that were selected by a selection committee, a life science selection committee, they'll present on Thursday at 12 noon. Today the session is so we have a lot more expert panels for the rest of the day after Joe's done, so be sure to stay on and attend the other events as well. Joe is an attorney that I've known for a very long time, very prominent, very successful, and has extreme knowledge in startups, in M&A transactions, and he's been really stable as part of the Orange County community, although he lives in New York. But he told me he's moving back eventually, aren't you, Joe?
Yeah, that's the plan. Next couple of years. Yep.
Okay, there you go. So he's well known here in the Southland for sure, and also in New York. This is a great presentation from him. He's going to talk really about a lot of things. So while he's talking, please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A section. He'll talk for about an hour. We'll have additional time, about 15 minutes, to answer questions towards the end. Joe, if you want to take questions along the way, you're welcome to do so. You'll have the ability to look at the Q&A as you're going through. Anyways, we appreciate everyone being here, and we look forward to joining us for the rest of the day today and also on Thursday to see all the presenters. Joe, please take it. Joe, we lost you.
Is my okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, camera's not on. It was on.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay.
All right, so everybody, this is my presentation, which I call structuring your startup for and then negotiating financing. Like JJ said, if you have any questions, as we're going through, just put it in the chat thing, and then he'll remind me if it's in there. If I don't see that, I mean, I can't even see where I don't see a chat thing on the screen, but maybe it'll pop up, or just like talk, just say something. I'm Joe Daniels. I'm a partner and the co-chair of emerging companies and venture capital at Nelson Mullins. Nelson Mullins is a 125-year-old full-service law firm, and we start up to Fortune 50 clients. And we basically have a department for everything a business needs, from corporate to intellectual property, litigation, real estate, tax, really immigration, everything. And we have about 1,000 lawyers. We're licensed in all over the U.S., but we have a global practice because we've been doing this for so long, and we have relationships with lawyers and great, good lawyers in every jurisdiction. And our 85 plus lawyer emerging companies practice represents startups and VCs in formation, financing, growth, and exit. Meaning specifically for startup companies, helping the company form correctly for the venture capital model, and also compatible with private equity and strategic financings, angels, and then helping them raise in successive rounds of angel and VC financing, helping the companies grow through acquisitions, partnerships, and commercial agreements of every type, and then helping the companies exit through a merger or acquisition transaction or an IPO. And my laptop is saying the battery's low again, even though it's plugged in. Shit. Let me just check that real quick. Sorry about that. Just a second. Okay. I don't get it. Okay, so talking about my firm, we're usually in the top 10 in angel and VC deals per quarter and year in the pitch book. Okay. We ranked number 8 in the United States on the company side in 22. 22, we did 250 deals for over 8 billion. Those are some of the startups and venture funds we represent. And we're also backed up by 150 M&A lawyers and 40 capital markets lawyers to do IPOs. We have a 60 lawyer IP group that does with specialists in most technical areas from technology to life sciences and consumer as well. And they do the patent, trademark, and copyright prosecution, litigation, and licensing, and have over 550 litigators ready to sue and defend all over the US and other lawyers in every area that a business needs. I've been doing this for 27 years, including 8 in California during the dot-com days in the group that took Netscape public and sold it to America Online. That was back in 95. Here are some of the big public companies I've represented, along with thousands of startups, a bunch of private equity and venture funds and investment banks like Credit Suisse and Morgan Stanley and Oppenheimer. I've done 25 IPOs and follow-ons, scores of M&A deals, and thousands of financings. I think I need to get some technical help here because I'm down to 1%. Hold on a second. I'll continue to talk about it though. I focus on high growth sectors like tech and life sciences. Hey, I'm in the middle of a presentation and my laptop is running out of power. So maybe we can get some kind of a different, can we get Danielle over here real quick? Okay, thanks. Here's some example financings that I've worked on recently. The power may cut off because it seems like the very battery for the laptop itself is, but we'll try to log back in. So this is the agenda: forming your company correctly, what is intellectual property, and then how do you raise money? What are the typical terms of pre-seed and seed rounds and A rounds? And here is my diagram explaining the components of a startup company. The little blue box in the bottom, you're probably the idea person or business development person, and you're contributing the business plan and other intangible ideas and assets like intellectual property.
We don't see it on the screen. We don't see it, Joe. Yeah.
You don't see what?
Your diagram.
What do you see?
It says the highly ranked 85 plus lawyers. That's all we see right now.
Oh, there's some problem with the transmission then. Perhaps due to the, is it caught up yet?
No, maybe stop sharing, then reshare.
Okay. How about that?
It's coming up. Yep, there you go.
Okay, sorry about that. Technical difficulties on both ends. So, like I said, now I'm down to 0%. I don't know what to do about this, JJ.
Maybe it is. Well, keep going. 0%, you should be off. So
I mean, it says plugged in.
Yeah, it should be okay. You
Okay.
should be good. Yep.
Yeah. So, and then you hire on personnel who provide services in exchange for equity. Again, and the person in the middle who contributed, like you, that contributed the business plan and other, the first founder, he or she also gets equity. And then the investors invest cash in exchange for equity. So when do you form that startup? The basic question that's out there often, in my opinion, when you have more than one person involved, because whenever you have more than one person involved, you can have a dispute over who owns the equity and who owns the intellectual property. And that can be, basically a Zuckerberg-Winklevoss situation, causing, lots of time and money spent on disputes. and totally screw up the company, basically. Short answer. And or when you have a material contract or an obligation, you want to limit your own personal liability. You don't want your personal assets and liabilities to be mixed with that of your business. That's a great thing about forming a company, because if the company loses money and there are creditors and has to shut down, then you as an individual stockholder don't have to pay for it. So if you form that company, what kind of company should you form? So typically for tech and life sciences companies, consumer, direct to consumer, you want to form a Delaware C corporation. Let's focus on the C corporation part first. Why? The number one reason why is the qualified small business stock exemption. This exempts, if you hold C corporation stock for 5 years and then sell that stock, anytime after that 5 years, then the greater of $10 million or 10 times the amount that you invest in exchange for your stock is exempt from capital gains taxes, which is at 25%. So, in the short-term rate, in 1 year, ordinary income, it's just, the highest possible rate. So lots of tax savings, probably up to about 2.5 for the individual founder, much more for an investor that invests like 20 million. If somebody invests 20 million, gets 200 million exempt. It's preferred. Also, C corps are just generally preferred by venture capital firms, private equity firms, and angels, because they don't want pass-through gain and loss, profit and loss, and because many of the funds out there have not-for-profit limited partners, and they would get a penalty tax if the profit is patent. The whole thing, it's a not-for-profit company, so it can't get profit through your startup. And then the corporate tax rate is 21%. I know that there have been proposals to increase that, but it's probably not going to pass. Then in which state should you incorporate? A lot of people think about Nevada or Wyoming because of either saving money or anonymity. But the bottom line is that people who know what they're doing generally incorporate in Delaware. If you look at it, 90% of new IPO companies and very large percentage of all public companies are Delaware corporations. And the reason why is because all the sophisticated investors, bankers, and lawyers and accountants, investors, people who do these deals, who invest money in companies and then sell them and everything, they've memorized Delaware law, but they don't know the laws of all the other states. So two main things you want to think about in terms of papering your company up between the time of incorporation in Delaware and the time that you raise money. First is equity documentation. Why? Number one, it avoids the disputes between people that I talked about, which basically can cost a lot of time and money. There's also a tax issue. If you paper your grants very close to the equity round, when the valuation is set, you may create ordinary income taxes for the people that receive that equity right before the grant, right before the equity financing. And the company, because if the person who receives the equity doesn't pay for the taxes, the company has to back it up. Also, all investors will require all equity to be, 1,000% correctly papered prior to the closing of the financing. It's the number one thing that we look at when we're on the investor side, is basically tying down the capitalization and paperwork. And what do you need for this? Basically, 2 documents for every single equity grant, whether that's for a founder or somebody joining after that. And their form agreements. It's easy to do, and it's very cost effective. Solves the problem, but at very low cost. Don't go on the internet to try to find it, though. You want to go to basically, the top 10 firms that work in the space. So when you issue equity to people for your startup, like, what form does it take? Well, it's usually common stock, which we call in this context restricted stock. Restricted because there's usually a vesting schedule, and the resale of the stock is restricted under securities laws. And next, options. So generally, between the time of formation of the company and the first price equity round, you grant this restricted stock, not the options, because for various reasons we'll explain. A price equity round is when you sell your stock for cash. That does not include selling safes and notes. So the great thing about restricted stock is that you can get the qualified small business stock treatment on it, and your holding period would begin from the time that you first get the equity grant, right? Your 5-year period starts when you get your stock. Therefore, it's the best from a tax perspective, because the first 10 million bucks is going to be tax-free on sale. But if it's vesting over time, which we recommend for most people, even founders, you have to file an 83B election with the IRS within 30 days of the issuance date of that stock, or you're going to have a big potential tax problem, basically having to pay a bunch of money in taxes if your company does well. So definitely get that thing on file. After that first price equity round, you grant options. This is a typical thing that happens. Of course, there's exceptions, but the idea is that you've valued the company. So the only way to grant the option to purchase common stock so that it doesn't cause taxes when you get it. I mean, nobody wants to join a company, sign an offer letter, and then have to pay taxes, right? So to make it to way that we make the taxes zero is we have the company gets a 409A appraisal and values that common stock in writing using all these complex valuation methodologies, usually at a 70 to 80% discount to the price at which the equity was sold in the equity financing. So if you sell preferred stock for $1 in the equity financing, you grant the options at 20 cents or 30 cents. Great, incredible benefit to the personnel because they're in the money by that 70, 80% discount from day one. It's not as good as the restricted stock, but the next best thing from a tax perspective. You don't have any taxes when you receive the grant. You're probably gonna have to pay ordinary income on the exit and plus AMT. And keep in mind, you can still grant restricted stock after the first price round, but the recipient either has to pay the 409A price or accept ordinary income for, for example, if the company allows you to pay with a promissory note. The next concept about equity is we usually recommend that all the people that get equity in a startup vest over time or some other schedule. And the reason why is because, for example, all the other people who are in the cap table who have equity in that company do not want everybody else to leave the next day and still own all the percentages that were allocated to them. For example, if you split the company 3 ways and then one person leaves the next day, you put it all in writing, it's all signed up. You want to be able to buy back a lot of their stock, if not all of their stock, because they only work for one day. Investors want your shares to vest over time because they want people to stick around after they've invested to build the startup. Otherwise, they get a free ride. They get the equity and they don't have to actually do anything for it. So the typical vesting schedules are what is called 3-year, 1-year cliff for founders, or 1/3 after 1 year and 1/36 each month after that. 4-year, 1-year cliff for people who join later than founders, however you define that, but it's pretty easy to see. Employees or consultants, advisors, interns. 4-year, 1-year cliff, meaning 1/4 after 1 year, 1/48 each month after that. And then directors and advisors on a 2-year monthly schedule, 1/24 a month. And then you want to consider the non-typical structures, which a lot of my clients use all the time, which is to have shares vest based on operational performance, meeting certain milestones such as revenue, product development, or what have you. The next major type of agreement you have to put in place, after you incorporate and before you raise money, is something called a service agreement. And you want to have service agreements when people join with all employees, consultants, advisors, and interns. Those are the 4 categories we usually classify personnel. Advisors and consultants are both contractors, so really the same thing. But there's usually a separate agreement for each of these 4 different categories because the laws that apply to them and the context in which they provide services is different. So, but they all provide for, and we're happy to share those types of forms with our clients, which they can then use to basically manage their own HR, right? I mean, we've set up forms for every state that work that way. But and the importance of these documents is that they achieve 5 things. First, confidentiality. Number 1. All your secrets, the company's secrets, valuable information, that person's not going to share it with anybody or use it for anything other than working with your company. Second, and that's important, especially with respect to trade secrets, because if they are able to share the trade secret, then it's not a trade secret anymore, or if they actually do that. The second, it requires the assignment of all intellectual property they create on the job, whether that's a logo, a jingle, a customer list, code, genomic sequence, whatever it may be, belongs to the company, not the individual. So when the individual leaves, if they leave, then they can't take the position. They own the IP, so the company can't use it. And then finally, it prevents them from soliciting and competing with the company, and then soliciting customers and suppliers, and also not speaking unfavorably about the company when they leave, and when and if they leave. And the reason for all these prohibitions and assignments and prohibitions on disclosure and use of confidential information is because people who leave companies very often do all 5 things. And this is a way for you to leverage the new employer and that individual to stop doing that. If you don't have this in place, then technically all the things that I just mentioned, they can go ahead and do that because they haven't agreed not to. You also want to try to tie the equity vesting in the service agreements, to tie them together so that you can leverage the person to actually perform the duties in the service agreement that they agreed to do when they receive the equity, because people will often only do like half time when they promise full time. Keep in mind, all investors will want all current and former personnel to assign one of these. So, I mean, basically what they want is, every single person who ever did anything with your startup to assign an appropriate service agreement based on the, what are the 4 categories they're in: advisor, consultant, intern, employee. And then you just put that in a data room. And that way, if they ask for a list of everybody who ever contributed, they can see the agreement in the right folder in the data room. Other important, pre-funding items. On the IP side, you want to use non-disclosure agreements anytime you share your confidential information, in particular where you share trade secrets. You want to consider filing for patent, trademark, and copyright protection for any of your valuable IP. We're going to talk about that later on. You want to have good lawyers draft or review all your material agreements, and then that includes generally, terms of use, privacy policy, customer, supplier, distributor, affiliate agreements, basically anything that involves license in and out of your intellectual property, because the only thing that governs the licensing in and out of your IP is something in writing signed by both sides. And then if you're in a regulated industry like healthcare, insurtech, fintech, you want to resolve any regulatory issues, at least know the pathway to do that, and your estimated cost of getting there in terms of lawyers or whoever else, so that you can explain that to investors. So we have about half an hour, so that's perfect. We can go through IP and then the funding stuff, financing, negotiating the financing, what are the terms of those deals. So here are the 4 different areas of IP law: patents, copyrights, trademarks, trade secrets. We're going to go through them very briefly in turn. What is a patent? It's a 20-year exclusive right to prevent others from making, using, selling, offering to sell, or importing a patented invention. The balancing act with the patent rules is that when you file a patent, you disclose everything about this technology, this invention, to the public when it finally issues from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and all over the world, wherever you file it. And that gives you this limited monopoly for 20 years. That can be incredibly valuable. But the problem is that with many technologies, merely showing people how you did it gives them a roadmap, really, for how to work around it and achieve the same or better or performance. So, but that is sort of counterbalanced by the fact that the United States is now a first to file jurisdiction, meaning that if you don't file a patent on your trade secreted technology, and another company or person files a patent and gets it on your, if they figure out how you did it or they just invent the same thing on their own, then they can prevent you from using your own technology in however important it is to your business. So that's why a lot of startups will investigate filing a provisional patent. It's pending for only 1 year. It's usually much cheaper, like $2,000 to $3,000 instead of $10,000 to $15,000. It's not examined by the USPTO. You don't have to have any back and forth or pay lawyers for that. But the priority begins when you file, and then you have to follow up with a full utility patent or a design patent within 1 year.
Yeah, it's so fine.
Right.
At least that's the way I think about it. So here's an example of a utility patent, a system and method for detecting and tracking features and images. And you can see there's a little decision tree there that explains exactly how this system and method works. And then there are, many pages, of course, behind that. And the concept here is that type of patent protects the way the invention actually works as compared to the design patent, which protects the ornamental appearance of the object, such as in this design patent example, where the USB flash drive housing patent protects that exact design, which as the years go by, looks more and more comical. Basic question people always ask, should you file a patent? Is it worth it? What's the point? Somebody can do a workaround, whatever, especially with software. biotech patents are not as easy to work around and can be very valuable. Just as an example, across industries it's different, but the answer to this question should be you find somebody who's really good at patent prosecution in your area of the technical area of your technology, and get a free consultation. We have 40-person IP department, numerous patent prosecutors that can give you that consultation and help you develop a patent strategy. Next, copyright. So what is a copyright? So for example, at the very bottom of this slide, it says copyright 2023 Joe Daniels, because this content is a work of authorship, something that's in my head, like all the ideas behind the words on the slides, and music and film and books reduced to a fixed form. And the copyright protects these works of authorship from unauthorized copying, distribution, and display. There's some, people get confused in the overlap between all these concepts, but a good example of copyrighted material is exactly that: books, music, films, and slide decks. Copyrights give you the exclusive right to copy, distribute, or display that work. By putting that Circle C notice on the bottom, what I'm doing is wherever this is being published right now, wherever all the audience members are located in those states, I'm getting common law copyright protection. But if I want federal protection for that content, like, for example, a musician is always going to be filing something in respect of their songs, you just simply upload it, file it with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and pay the filing fee. And we often recommend clients do that themselves. As you might expect, the standard for infringement of a copyright is where the person has access to it. For example, stock photos. And then you can show that there's a substantial similarity between the infringing and the copyrighted work. And plagiarism is a good example of that. With trademarks and trade secrets, the third type of IP, what these are is names, logos, and designs and sounds, the purpose of which is to identify the source of goods and services. So things like the Nike swoosh logo, the little white apple that is now the Apple logo, used to be multicolored, designs. So I can't think of an example of a good design. The Intel Inside sound. And the standard for infringement is similarly a substantial likelihood of confusion between the whatever mark you're using, for example, and what other people are using. You protect your trademarks by filing an application with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office if you want the full 50-state thing. But again, where you're using a trademark to market goods and services in a particular U.S. state, you're getting common law rights in that state. You get the quote unquote first usage of that trademark on record. And that can help you get the full federal trademark. So what we usually recommend with companies, startup companies, developing products under brand names, is that they do a Google search at the very least and look down 20 pages and make sure that they're not potentially infringing somebody else's trademark. In other words, where they're using a similar mark in a similar business, because trademarks apply by industry classification. So if you do that search and you find something, you think it's a great name for whatever you're planning to do, but you see there's other people who are doing it and maybe people who have a lot of resources, then you may consider simply just changing the name, or, putting some kind of logo around it or diagram around it to make it different. And of course you can, consult with a trademark lawyer to help you do that. And then once it's been determined that you think that it's really your mark is really valuable, you can spend the extra money to do trademark searches, and if you get a lawyer to conclude that you're not infringing anybody else. If you're not infringing anybody else, then that means you can file for it on a federal level and have a reasonable assurance that you're going to actually get the trademark. Finally, trade secrets. So trade secrets are not filed with anywhere; they're just kept secret. It's the definition of a trade secret is that it's a technology that derives independent economic value that is subject to reasonable efforts to protect it from disclosure. So, for example, I give the example of the Coca-Cola formula, which is in a vault across the street from the Coke headquarters, which only a few people have the combination or whatever access codes for. Other basic things you have to do is non-disclosure agreement. Anytime you're sharing trade secrets with anyone, you have to have an NDA with them, or You're just publishing your trade secret, therefore it's no longer a trade secret. And you have to use whatever other reasonable methods there are in today's world. Two-factor or three-factor authentication of access codes and things like that. Now I can't advance the slides. JJ, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Again, I would say stop and then reshare again.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's that.
This is hilarious today.
Can't advance the slide. At least we were able to get through IP, but the juiciest part is the financing stuff, which we're going to do now. It's almost comical just to watch the fact that we can't get this thing to advance the slide.
Where is the presentation?
I want to just stop sharing and reshare. Just hit the red thing right there, stop share, and then reshare.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you just hit on that, I think, right? Isn't that the slide deck?
Yeah, it should be here. This is it.
Okay, can I advance it though?
Yeah.
There we go. All right, raising money. So how do you raise money at an early stage? And we usually distinguish between the pre-seed financing and the seed financing. And the pre-seed, the typical round size is between 50 grand and $2 million. And you're selling, let's say 1 to 10% of the company. Bunch of people with 50 grand, 250K, 100K, all, sort of team up together. Maybe there's a lead that comes in with $1 million. And in that situation, in the life sciences space, you really just have some founders and some kind of demonstration of a product market fit. What does that mean? Perhaps a technology that seems very promising with some limited data. For a seed round, you're raising more like $2 to $10 million. You're selling 15 to 45% of the company, and there you're probably going to need some strong founders, apparent product market fit. This meaningful traction part of the slide is actually for tech companies. Forget about that. Doesn't apply in life sciences. You're probably the further along you are in research and development and on commercialization and having data that actually shows effectiveness is the most important thing. Not to mention partnerships with big pharma or other potential distributors of the eventual product. And the investors in these rounds are accredited individuals, or what we call angels, and early stage VCs. So you either will be talking to all these investors and someone will be willing to lead the round and they'll actually provide you a term sheet, which you can review and negotiate with them, or you have to create your own term sheet or your own convertible note or your own safe, and then you work with counsel to make that appropriate for the market based on the stage of your company. And if you go to the let's say top 10 firms that are doing these financings all the times, we see so many transactions. We actually know what terms you should offer based on the stage of the company. And there's all kinds of data out there that helps you with that as well. So what are the popular ways that you raise those pre-seed and seed rounds? Basically, it's convertible notes, safes, and series seed preferred stock. That's 3 different types of securities. Why do people sell convertible notes or safes? The short answer is it's a lot cheaper generally. It could be a couple $100 for one of my associates to fill in the blanks on a form convertible note or a form safe, and we have forms for virtually every situation. And you don't have to set the company's valuation. So, for example, if some investor says, "Oh, okay, I'd be happy to invest in your like $1 million in your company at a $3 million pre-money, so that I get 25% of the company," but you think your company is worth 10 million pre-money. So how do you come together? You can't really. There's no way to achieve that. You can't just say, well, let's split the baby. That's like a 7 million delta. So let's make it, 6.5 million pre-money, because the investor will just say, no, I want it at 3. I want my 25%. So instead that you could take the position, well, how about a convertible note that converts into the next equity round at the lower of the next round price and 6.5. So if the next round price is 4 million, then they get in at 4. That's why people go with convertible notes and safes. Also, after you sell notes and safes, you can still issue that restricted stock, which is better than the options, is better for your new team members who join after the the seed financing or the pre-seed financing and the next round. Why would people want to sell preferred stock instead? I mean, this is the preferred stock that has fueled the Silicon Valley and all other U.S. innovation in tech and life sciences for decades, meaning everything from HP and Oracle to Zoom and Tesla. SpaceX is on Series M preferred stock. Why? Because people don't want the investor wants to set a valuation. They want that 3 million set in stone. They don't want to wait and see what the next equity round is and what the variable conversion price will come up with. And then you want the money, you want the $1 million, so you agree to that. Or you have a bunch of notes and safes outstanding and you want to convert them because people have been waiting around for a long time to get a return, and an equity round converts them. So what is a convertible note? And once you know what the terms of the note are, then you understand what a safe is, et cetera. So as I alluded to, the convertible note principal amount plus interest converts automatically into the next equity financing where you raise a minimum amount of money. So the way you sell the note is you say, look, we're raising $500,000 in convertible notes right now as sort of a pre-seed round. Then we're going to, further develop technology, run more tests and trials and get more data. And then we're going to go out and do a seed round with a 10 million pre-money. So agree to a 10 to 15% discount off the next round. The key is that if you raise a minimum of, let's say, $1 million in that seed round, then the notes convert. There's always like a minimum capital raise target for a convertible note, and you want that to be as low as possible if you're the company. And then at that, the other main term of a convertible note is that at that financing round, it converts at a discount. What the typical deal for friends and family would be discount only notes, or where the deal is so hot that you can actually get this term, where they're sold at a 10 to 25% discount to round price. So if the next equity financing, you sell $500K in notes, next equity financing is at a 10 million pre-money and they have a 10% discount, then obviously the note converts at 9 million pre-money. The next best would be a cap only note, and that's the most popular. Probably 85% of notes are cap only, where the note converts to the lower of the next round price. If it's a 10 million, they get in at 10 million, and a cap. Let's say that 6.5 million that was splitting the baby in that hypothetical I gave you. So in that situation, if you raise at 4, they get into 4. If you raise at 10, they get into 6.5. And then the next level, which is lower of discounted price or cap, gives the investor both those benefits. And so ending up in basically they could get in at an even lower price. And therefore it's generally you should reject that. And the market sort of has rejected that. It's not very commonplace. It's only outliers where companies are desperate or they don't know what they're doing. Keep in mind the conversion formula for notes and safes should include all other note and safe shares. That makes the note pre-money. That's better for the company. From an investor, obviously they want it to be post-money, because what that means is that if it's pre-money, then the investor, the new money after the notes or safes, shares in the dilution in the note of their position by the notes and the safes. Whereas if it's post-money, then only founders or people who came before the notes and the safes get diluted. Principal amount is important because that is how much money you get, and then of course what tells you eventually what the percentage of the company that the investors are going to get is. And the interest is usually actually between 4 and 8% right now with the higher interest rates. Historically between 2 and 6. This is not usually a heavily negotiated number. People are usually on the lower end of the spectrum, and but it's not a big component of return and not a big price for you because it usually only accrues over 18 to 24 months. In contrast, what is a safe? A safe is exactly the same as that convertible note I just described, but it has no maturity date and it has no interest. Much better for the company because when the maturity date comes 18 to 24 months out, each of those note and safe holders can ask for their money back, and the interest continues to accrue until that time, basically giving them more shares on conversion. So why did the people innovate this? Not just greedy founders, but rather it was the Y Combinator accelerator in the Valley that created this safe. And the reason why is because most people who invest in startup companies have over $10 million in net worth, and or they're just really greedy. And those people don't care about getting their money back from a note or safe investment from a company that has failed to raise the next round and otherwise succeed. What they want is a 10x to 30x return on the companies that do succeed. So so they don't want, if they're one of like 10 investors invest $100,000 in $1 million round, for one convertible note investor to say, I want my money back after 18 months, because that can blow up the company's plans, whether it's for raising money or whatever their operating plans are, entering into a key customer or distributor agreement, for example. So all the investors in the Valley decided, let's go with safes. And that's why the whole market shifted to safes, and it sort of shifted that way nationwide. But then again, some investors still don't get it. In that case, just go back to the convertible note in the situation where it makes sense. And then always use the pre-money safe, as I said about the notes, instead of the current Y Combinator safes online, because those are all post money. Those are all investor favorable, unless of course the caps that you're talking about on these safes are, really, really high, like, let's say over $100 million. Okay, now side letters for note and safe amendments. I'm just going to quickly run through this and get to preferred stock, because you need to know about that. So most favored nation, generally just reject that. That just means if you sell a note or a safe with better terms down the road than the ones you sold before, get the exact same terms. Try to reject that, because it's not fair, because the first investor could put in 50K, and then the next investor, and that 50K guy gets MFN, and then the next investor invests 5 million and it has slightly better terms. The $50,000 investor should not get those same terms. Just stands to reason. Of course, investors want that, but if you reject it, it's usually accepted. Pro rata rights is a right to purchase the same percentage of the next equity round or next financing that your note or safe converts into. This is not so bad if it terminates at the closing of the next round, which is market. So they only get one bite at that pro rata right apple. But you don't want to give it to everybody and their mother, because generally the pro rata rights end up diluting you in that next equity financing for reasons I won't get into. It's too complicated. Takes too long. So board or observer seats, usually you never give a board seat with a note or a safe. You might give observer seats, and that's basically just giving the that note or safe investor the same level of information as a director would have, which is anything about the company, absolutely anything and everything. But I would try to limit that also to people who invest a fair amount of money, let's say 500 grand or more, because the more observers you have, the more people can attend your board meetings and give you a hard time. If they will ask to talk sometimes, and sometimes not. But you're just sharing all that information with a wider group, which means more people could potentially harass you or give you a hard time. And then finally, blocking rights. Some I've seen note and safe investor try to get a right to have to approve any merger, acquisition, or sale of the company, raising new money, and that's totally not market. So just generally reject that. Okay, finally, terms of preferred stock. So, like I said, this is the security that fuels tech and biotech innovation, or even medical device innovation all across the country and the world. It's the most common form of investing in these types of fast growth companies. So the most important term is always, of course, the pre-money valuation. So, for example, and that determines what percentage the investors are going to get. So, for example, if someone's raising 2 million on an 8 million pre-money, that means the post money is 10 million. There, and 2 over 10 is 20%. So that 2 on 8 or 2 million on 8 million pre-money means the 2 million investor gets 20% of the company. Basic venture math. The trick to this is not you want to get the highest pre-money possible, of course, is not the 2 on 8 part, but rather price lowering techniques that people put into term sheets. The two major price lowering techniques are to say, number one, 2 on 8, but let's have you approve a 10% option pool that's included in the pre-money. That basically means a 10% discount off the 8 to 7.2 million. Or let's include that all the note and the safe shares from those notes and safes you sold before the first price equity round, all those shares convert pre-money instead of post. Again, that just dilutes the common or the founders more, or everybody on the team who has common stock more. So watch out for that in your term sheets. The liquidation preference is also very important. It is it's over 90% of deals, from Series C to A, B, and C even, just 1x non-participating, because that's just, the market has sort of, indicated that that's what most people perceive as fair for the cash investor in this type of company. What it means is they get the greater of their money back or their as converted amount. As converted amount is basically, like I said, in the 2-on-8 million pre-money, 20% in the hypothetical I gave you before. So for example, if you invest 2-on-8 and then the company sold for $3 million, then the investors get $2 million off the top, and then the 1 million is split with the other stockholders. The company sold for 100 million, the investors get $20 million, 20%. So that's typical. What's not typical is like 2x non-participating, which would mean in the last scenario, they would get 40 million off the top instead of 100. Or actually, sorry, they would get 4 million off the top, and but they'd still get 20% off the 100. So if the company sold for 4 million, they would get everything. That's 2x non-participating. Or let's say 1x participating, in which case you would get, if the company sold for 100 million, 2 million off the top, and then 20% of the 96 million after that. Bottom line with that, any changes from 1x non-participating is bad for the founder and the common stockholders. Therefore, try to keep it at 1x non-participating. Some crazy investors will ask for that. Usually don't give any board seats in a pre-seed or a seed round. But if you do, then it should be a minority seat, like 1 out of 3, 1 out of 2, sorry, no, not 1 out of 2, 1 out of 3, or 2 out of 5, so that they cannot control the vote of the board, because they're buying a small percentage of the company. So they should not have a greater than 50% representation on the board. It's just like a representative democracy. But you might very well give out observer seats, the same, and they have the same message on that. Try to give it to as few as possible, so you don't have 50 people showing up at your board meeting. There are also major blocking rights that are given in preferred stock financings on raising new money, selling the company, making a dividend, buying back stock, changing the size of the board, all the things, the most important things in a economically and from a control perspective in a company's life. And you want that list to be small, right? I mean, some people, investors will come in asking for 15. Their lawyers, a junior associate on the legal team, got overzealous and included everything but the kitchen sink in 3 different ways. And so you want to try to chop that back. And with the big ones, like raising new money, try to make it where they only have a right to block a financing that is less than, let's say, 50 million pre-money, or they can block a sale of the company, but only if it's less than 50 million bucks. Try to make those little changes so that in the situations that you expect, they can't stop you, because the interests of investors and company management can obviously very significantly diverge. There's actually, with any dilution protection that's becoming more popular, I wouldn't worry about it. That's, if you have to give that up. Major investor rights, that's information rights and pro rata rights, like we talked about with the side letters. Try to limit that to people who invest a minimum amount, and then look out for the vesting restart, which is where investors will ask you to reset your vesting. Like I recommended before, you should have vesting in the beginning, so you have a line in the sand. Say, look, I already vested in 3 years, so I'm not going to restart my vesting, because sometimes they'll ask for 4 years from the time that they invest. In many situations, that would be crazy, because you've already earned it with 5 years of building the company that they're investing in. And their argument is going to be, we want you to stick around for the next 4 years and actually build this company, right? Okay, understood. But the thing is, I built this thing over 5 years or 3 years or 1 year. It's my baby. I'm not going to walk away. You don't have to worry about it. Just take it or leave it, on those terms. And usually after, a good number of rejections of that concept, they will back down. How much time do we have, JJ?
We have really about 15 minutes.
All right. So
You have a couple of questions in the Q&A if you want to answer at all. I can read them for you if you want.
Oh, I'd love a copy of these slides from Henry.
No, the one before that. Oh, I guess, yeah. Maybe you don't see it. What is the market rate for preferences on shares issued to investors in a seed round at the moment?
Market rate for what?
For preferences on shares issued to investors.
Yeah, I think that what that is asking is, he's talking about the liquidation preference. So like I said, it's the 1x non-participating.
Okay, that's it. That's the only question we have.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, is this open? Can you address the need for 83B filings? Of course. So, when you get that more valuable than stock options, restricted stock, and there's vesting, if you do not file an 83B election within 30 days with the IRS, within 30 days of buying the shares, then instead, and what that does is it says you're recognizing all of the taxes associated with that purchase at the time of the purchase. And at that time, there's no difference between the amount you're paying, which is virtually zero, and the actual value of the stock because you just founded the company. Or it's like still a company that's basically worthless because no value has really been developed in it yet when you're getting those shares. Instead, you recognize, if you don't file the 83B, you recognize ordinary income every time the shares vest, which as the company increases in value can be a steadily increasing big giant amount of money. So definitely file your 83Bs within 30 days of getting any stock that's vesting over time. Any other questions? You can. I think it's open to discussion as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, anybody who has a question, we can bring you in also with so you can ask a question live via video or audio. But are you done or not done yet?
In terms of the presentation?
Yeah, in terms of presentation.
Oh, it depends on how far you want me to go. I mean, I can go into Series A, B, C. Does anybody in the audience actually, are they ready for a Series A, or B, or C round?
Well, A, yes, some of them are.
Okay, let's go through the A
So
round.
you can keep going until we have questions or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. So what is the A round? So it's usually, of course, you have the strong founders and an appropriate team, but you've also demonstrated product market fit, meaning in the life sciences industries, you've developed a promising technology that shows some potential of being commercialized, which generally means data, trials data, whatever data is applicable given your regulatory pathway. Having some annual run rate, depending upon the industry and how quickly your product can be commercialized, is always going to be good. The typical round size in the first quarter of this year was around $10 million. The median valuation, $30 million. So that means you're basically selling 20% of the company for $10 million. And the investors in the A rounds are venture capital firms, private equity funds, and strategic investors, and also prior round investors who have pro rata rights. These median round size and valuation numbers are commonly over the past 10 years or so skewed by mega rounds, meaning over $100 million raises, but the effect of that in the first quarter of 23 is much less than in the past 2 years. What are the differences between Series A preferred stock and the Series C preferred stock that I just talked about? You have the same issues with the pre-money valuation and trying to keep the equity plan small. The solution on when investors ask that the company adopt let's say 15% or 10% equity incentive plan, or increase the size of the plan so it's 10 to 15% of the post-money capitalization and include all those shares in the pre-money, again, is to make sure that all people who participate in the company from an equity basis prior to their investment are taking all the dilution on all the new hires after that they invest their money to the tune of 10 to 15% of the company. Is to say, well, I don't need to give away 10 to 15% of the company between the A round and the B round. Instead, I only need 5%. And so that's basically saying, I'll agree to take 5% dilution on the people that I need to hire to get this company to the B round, but not 15. And that's better for you. You still want to try to exclude the note and the safe shares from the pre-money. Liquidation preference is still almost always 1x non-participating, but with board seats, like I mentioned, a seed round investor, if they have any board seats, are definitely going to be in the minority. But when you have an A round, then you're probably talking about 2 seats given to the investors, 1 seat for the lead VC and 1 legacy seat for the seed investors, unless they're willing to give it up, because they probably have a veto right on whether or not you can raise that A round, unless the valuation of the A round is higher than that limit that I talked about before. So here's the sort of like different alternatives in the board structure. I'm just looking at this. You're going from most favorable to company or founder to least favorable, right? So 2 founder seats, 1 VC seat. That means founder absolutely controls the company. Same thing as like having 3 founders and 2 VC seats. That could be 1 A round and 1 seed round VC. That's very common. Next, almost as favorable would be 1 founder seat, 1 CEO seat, and the CEO is usually an existing founder, so it's still 2 to 1, and 1 VC. Then the founders control, unless the CEO resigns, that the board cannot fire the CEO, because the CEO and the other, unless the other founder votes against the CEO, which is a risk. And that's why the first bullet is better than the second. Same thing. That's the same thing as having 2 founder seats, 1 CEO, and 2 VC seats. If you think about it. Next, a little bit less favorable would be 2 founder seats, 2 investor seats, and 1 independent. And the independent breaks the deadlock, and the independent is mutually agreed upon by the founders and the investors. Okay, very commonly offered by investors where they either are greedy about control because they know that their interests can often diverge with founders. In a simple situation like where a founder wants to keep building the company, keep raising money and building the company, and the VC firm or firms want to sell the company because they want to lock in a return so that they can get a great internal rate of return on their fund, which is ending in a year or 2, or maybe in 6 months. And then they can distribute the proceeds to their LPs. The LPs are happy, then they can go raise a new fund. Because the investment period in a typical VC fund is in the first 5 years of the 10-year life. So they actually are not really even making investments anymore out of that fund. They want to lock in that return and cash out. And that could end up, from a founder perspective, that could mean that the founder is ending up exiting at a much lower level than it wants to. That's why these board structures are so important. So this is a livable structure, bullet point 3, from a founder control perspective. If, for example, the founder has to appoint or designate the independent director subject to the approval of the investors, then it doesn't matter who. The independent director will always be someone that is picked by the founders, right? But that's sort of obviously not as good as bullets 1 and 2. And then you start getting into situations where investors control in bullets 4 and 5. Sort of goes without saying what that structure means. And then you have the explanation, and we will give you copies of these slides. Blocking rights, the list of blocking rights, I said, she try to keep it as short as possible. It's going to have to get longer for the A round. Again, just try to limit it as much as possible and think ahead about, how are you going to be able to operate and do this and that if they have to approve everything, because very often, not very often, but sometimes when you want to get VC approval, they don't approve it, and then you're in trouble. Anti-dilution protection carve-outs. You got to have a carve-out from the anti-dilution protection for the equity incentive plan and numerous other things. That's sort of a legal concept. I'm not going to get into the details, but just make sure that you get as many carve-outs as possible. You want to, again, try to limit the major investor rights by negotiating a minimum dollar threshold for information rights and pro rata rights. There's a big stock purchase agreement with 20 to 25 to 30 pages of representations and warranties that talk about a perfect baseline situation of a U.S. company, and this is part of a process of the company having to put down on a disclosure schedule all the deviations from that perfect scenario described in the reps and warranties. You got to take that seriously. You have to look very carefully at the reps and warranties. Think of every exception. Put it down on the disclosure schedule. And then there's a full battery of new rights that are provided to the preferred stock investors, including 25 pages of registration rights to either demand or piggyback onto an IPO after, let's say, 3 to 5 years after the investment, as well as rights of first refusal and co-sale on founder transfers of stock, restrictions on transfers of any stock in the cap table other than the stock that was purchased for cash. So you have to be prepared to sign when you get to the A round, and get a lot of your stakeholders to sign and personnel 5 major documents of 100, let's say 100 pages. And that's market. Don't think it's not market. People do it all the time, and with the right guidance, you can get through it without a significant problem. And again, I'm blocked from, I don't know what I'm doing to do that, but there we go. B round. Do we have a little bit of time for Q&A? And what do we have left in the box?
We do. David McConnell. Yeah, we'll give you the slides,
would-
David. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, everybody's asking for the slides. Yeah, we'll give you the slides.
We'll go on the slides. Yes.
Remember, it says copyright 2023 Joe Daniels in the bottom left.
There you go. Can't distribute it after you get it.
Right. Unless you want to pay a royalty. So, and this has a lot of information about strategic financings and so forth. And if anybody has any questions, and I'll just do some marketing at the end here. We have a $1,500 formation package for startups. Basically everything you need between the time of, before you're incorporated until raising money the first time. Bunch of stuff. What's different about our package versus a lot of people is that we will actually customizing it using our proprietary sort of assembly line, startup assembly line that we'll probably incorporate, 25 companies a quarter in sort of the venture friendly manner. And we also commonly defer up to 15,000 of fees between the time of formation and the first capital raise. So you definitely want to take advantage of that. Any other questions? Let's see, 6. David, what's your question? Because I can't manipulate this slide bar.
Yeah, I know. I can't.
I think maybe he didn't actually do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't know. All right, I'll clear all of them.
Okay. So if anybody has any other questions, you can just reach me. That's
Yeah,
my
we only
team.
have a couple of minutes really here, or definitely you can reach Joe. That's his email. There is a question from Matt. Inc. Delaware typically for VC friendly.
Yeah, should you incorporate in Delaware? Typically, yes, 1,000%. That was in the first couple of slides. You can look at that and tells you why. But the bottom line is that, like I said, all the investors, attorneys, accountants, bankers, everybody that works on financing transactions, raising money, whether it's debt or equity, they all have memorized basic principles of Delaware law, and they all know virtually nothing about the laws of New York, California, Texas, all the major other states, all of the other states. And the law in Delaware is extremely predictable because it has that inertia of like so many companies are formed there. So that's where you want to go.
All right, I guess that was it. Okay, I think we're good. If there are no other questions, we have another expert panel coming up at 11:30, which is in about 7 minutes from now. Joe, this was fantastic. Although we had all these technical issues, I actually, while you were having technical issues, I had Quan try to jump in. He had technical issues. He's an IP attorney. And then I lost my internet along the way as well. So there you go. And
Must be a special day from a cosmic perspective.
A special day. And before we jumped on, also Joe knows that I had 3 computers that were not working either. So it was really bad today. Well, at least during this session.
Yeah, but we did it. We did it.
We did it. We
How many
definitely
attendees did we have anyway?
We had 30 attendees today. Yeah, it's good.
If anybody has any questions, let me know. I'm going to sign off. Have
Please
fun.
do. Thanks, Joe. Yes, please reach out to Joe for any questions. Reach out to me if you need anything, and I will forward the PowerPoint presentation that Joe sent me as well. So, or
right.
Joe actually will send me. I don't have it. Maybe I do. Well, I don't have it with the 2023 copyright. So I have it.
Yeah, I'm going to send you that.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.